Okay, and we're back with the second part of our lecture video on the Cultural Revolution. So in January of 1967, that violence was turned against the state, the government that is, with Red Guards told to oust officials from their offices and take control of the machinery of the government. Young people, teachers with no experience in teenagers with no experience in administration or leadership, or people in their early 20s, were in control and given the task of rebuilding the party from the ground up. Soon thereafter, and even before they took control over these agencies, infighting between Red Guards spread quickly as Chinese Communist Party leaders formed their own cliques and factions to protect themselves. The Red Guards were also divided along class lines into two broad camps: those that were the children of well-educated families, professionals, and intellectuals, that performed very well on their college entrance exams and in college and high schools. And those of the new elite, their parents were the cadre leaders and party members. They came from families that had a class background that was considered to be revolutionary first rate. The two fought bitterly with each other and vied for control of these agencies and the cliques that they formed. As a result, much of their energy was focused on fighting enemies and securing power, staying in control of these agencies and preventing some kind of attack that would displace them or take down their leaders. They weren't actually concerned all that much with operating the postal system, tax collection, revising educational curriculum, or other daily matters that were handled by the government. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as we mentioned last time, this meant that China's trade and diplomacy overnight ground to a halt. Save but one diplomat was recalled from abroad. All others were brought home to be accused of crimes, to be removed from power. Squads of Red Guards at the Foreign Ministry destroyed records and forced its foreign minister, Chen Yi, to undergo struggle meetings in front of thousands of jeering students. Embassies for the Soviets were invaded, and the British and Indonesian embassies were actually burned to the ground in the 1960s. By mid-1967, factions of Red Guards had attempted to take control of the People's Liberation Army in areas such as Wuhan, a move that most within the military violently rejected. They put a limit on the power and license afforded the Red Guards by Mao's injunctions. Instead, Mao was finally moved to caution and proclaimed the Red Guard units officially disbanded in July 1968. The People's Liberation Army was called upon to rein them in, while Mao called their mission a failure. And instead, he sent them to the countryside for an education and revolution through hard labor and humble circumstances. Most of them would be relegated to clean latrines in China's centuries-old tradition of collecting night soil. While most cities had modern plumbing by this point, much of the countryside still used the custom of gravity. Collected in latrines where men and women were only separated by a central wall, the daily collection of this night soil, or human fertilizer, was mixed with other organic material for the fields. Going from saviors of the country and future generational leaders to handlers of feces, the Red Guard generation experienced enormous regret, disillusionment. Among them is Chen Xiaolu, pictured here on this slide. He is one of a scant few who have since that time issued formal public apologies for their actions. Discussion of the Cultural Revolution is still largely taboo in contemporary China and subject to severe censorship, although sporadic instances of public discussion have taken place since the 1990s, if the content and the channels are proper. Chen, for example, at the start of the Cultural Revolution, was a Red Guard leader from an elite high school in Beijing. His father was actually Chen Yi, the revolutionary and foreign minister that we just mentioned a second ago as being victimized by the Red Guards during that time. Chen, though, has since confessed that he led an attack on Beijing educators that would incite a wave of attacks on school officials and teachers that led them to be whipped, beaten with leather belts or clubs, and other blunt instruments. His school's party secretary would later commit suicide, while another faculty member was crippled for life. Chen has expressed anguish at his own actions and the violation of a central tenet of the old Confucian society of China, the veneration and respect for teachers and education itself, that it was inflicted and done harm by his generation. He has been careful, though, to limit the blame to himself. He doesn't mention Mao or even the current leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. And while he is allowed to confess his actions and talk about his life as a Red Guard with foreign media and sometimes local newspapers, He has also been told explicitly never to do interviews with national media or human rights groups. While these phases were happening, rising hostility in Xinjiang, the result of border raids and skirmishes between Soviet and Chinese troops, raised for Mao the specter of China being entirely encircled by superpower foes in the Cold War. The US, from its eastern coast, with its bases on South Korea, Okinawa, and Japan, and its alliance with Taiwan, and now in the north and west along the border by the Soviets. Preparing for the potential of war and invasion, Mao adopted what was known as the Third Front, a massive undertaking to create a military-industrial complex in China's underdeveloped northwest and southwest. Many of these projects included building rail lines, armaments, factories, iron mines, steel mills, and hydro dams in those areas. It drained the economy of enormous resources that were scarce at the time, with nearly a third of the schemes eventually being unfinished or abandoned. These, along with other myths about the Chinese countryside during this time as becoming self-reliant again, meaning that they made their own machinery or consumer goods such as textiles and silk without any financial support or aid from the national government, meant that the Cultural Revolution was another one of Mao's economic disasters as well. By the early 1970s, the Cultural Revolution meant that Mao was again unrivaled in power within the party and society. His rivals had been decimated, but his declining health and the unmitigated disaster of the Cultural Revolution had created uncertainty about the future of the country. His anointed successor, Marshal Lin, number 2 in the party, suddenly and swiftly fell from power. Mao grew fearful of his own dependence on the People's Liberation Army. It was they that eventually reined in the Red Guards. And he became suspicious of the general, as the new ministries and government that was formed in the aftermath were stacked with military men loyal to Lin Biao. To show that Mao intended the political tides to now run away from Lin, he used ornate symbolic gestures, slogans, and positioning in photograph and media, such as Lin no longer being photographed alongside Mao in party posters, and then instead shifted to the background. Not naive, Lin began plotting a coup with his son, but learned the entire scheme was being leaked to the chairman by an insider within his circle. Allegedly, in the middle of the night, Lin Biao and his wife flew for the Soviet Union, either crashing or being shot down by the Chinese Air Force over the skies of Mongolia. The exact nature of Lin's death is still hotly contested, but it is known that in his sudden death, the murky details of his demise that were slowly, over months, leaked to the press and to the public, and the complete turnabout, where Mao's most loyal follower was now seen as a traitor, spent what little faith and trust most people had left in Mao and the Chinese Communist Party's leadership. The public had been exhausted by the twists and turns and changing political fates, the endless party speak about the need for struggle and conflict, which seemingly produced nothing but the chance for more conflict and struggle. Meanwhile, inside the party, Mao's increasing work in cooperation again with Zhou Enlai to guide the nation back to stability meant that the radicals, those that supported the Gang of Four and Mao's wife Jiang Qing, now had to compete with a resurgent class of moderates and planners. Zhou had used his influence to recall Deng Xiaoping, who had been purged from the ranks of the party during the Cultural Revolution, but had now risen back up to the third highest ranking member of the party. And the two camps, the radicals and these what we'll call moderates, spent the mid-1970s preparing for a struggle that would kick off the second that the aging dictator closed his eyes for the last time. Okay. Millions of lives were devastated in this decade, but the experience of the Cultural Revolution is not really something that can be grasped in statistics, or even the story told here about its motivations, its unfolding, and its slow, simmering end. Instead, I want you to focus on this question this week. In exploring the Cultural Revolution, which is more effective, or which is more powerful and impactful on how you understand it? Art, even if it is fiction, such as the film and novel To Live, or some oral histories, the words of survivors and participants that I'm going to add into this module. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each form for reviving and recovering what happened in the past, with something as shrouded in controversy and mythology as the Cultural Revolution? Okay, again, as always, I hope that you're well, that you're healthy and that you're having a lot of academic success. If you have questions or need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.